I'm Prabashni, Subrayan, Naidoo. I'm a practicing attorney, GBV activist, and I've been working in this sphere for the last 8 years.
Thank you, Prabashni, for joining us at Collective Action Magazine. So we're here today on the second day of the Presidential Summit on Gender-Based Violence, the second edition. Just a question for you. We heard the President yesterday in his official statement just giving us feedback as a collective on how far we've come the last 4 years since the last summit. What are your thoughts on his feedback? Are you confident that we've made significant strides when it comes to the fight against gender-based violence? Like 4 years ago, we were not talking to each other as an industry. Now at least you can get us into one room. Do you feel that we have made any significant strides?
Look, in terms of stride, I would say we have made some stride. Whether that has been enough, I do not think so. Why? Look, we've got many things going. We've got the National Strategic Plan, we've got the 6 pillars, we've got all of this. But if you listen to the President yesterday, he says he hasn't really been receiving a report from various ministries detailing their efforts in combating gender-based violence. He says they do come in, they're sporadic. I really don't think this is a platform to use the word sporadic. He is the president. He needs to hold his ministries accountable. They are accountable to the people. That answer for me was not good enough. There is so much more. I feel like this summit what we have in place, we need to focus a little bit more. We need to focus a little bit more on children. We need to place a lot of emphasis from national level on the LGBTQI community. If we could have directorates at that level, stemming down from national all the way to provincial, will make great headways. Because look, the community, or should I say society, and the government right now, we are not looking at the LGBTQIA and the transgender community as we're looking at them as, how can I put the second generation or second class citizens, second class citizens, and that should not be the case. Yesterday, if we looked at the debate that was hosted by Eusebius Makaiza, when the question of sex workers becoming decriminalized, we just had one minister that raised his hands in saying, I am for the decriminalization of sex workers. We live in a society. This entire summit is about ending GBV and femicide. And here we have half of a ministry, or maybe not even half. We had 6 members from the ministry who was not supporting the call to decriminalize sexual workers. And we need to ask ourselves these questions. Who is responsible for where women find themselves, that they have to resort to finding or making a way for a better living? And that is only accountable by society. We find ourselves where we are today with gender-based violence is because we do not hold institutions accountable. We had a report by the General of SAPS. Those reports nowhere near provides the actual data of what we face on a daily basis. I am in a courtroom every single day, and what has been spoken here at the summit does not depict the true nature of what is going out there in the real world. It's all good and well to have a summit, to have things in black and white, but to actually know what really goes on, we need ground level people, we need government institutions, we need the Ministry of Justice, we need the Ministry of Police to be actively involved in what's going down.
Thank you for that. You spoke about the other, away from women, you've got children, the LGBTQI community and other communities as second-class citizens when it comes to the GBV space. Now, we heard the President also mentioning that he wants to encourage, or is encouraging, a more inclusive approach. That means bringing men into the whole conversation about gender-based violence. considering the fact that this was not part of the NSP mandate. No, that's not the word. NSP, the strategic plan. I mean, it caters for women, children, LGBT community, and other communities, but men were never part of it. How do you feel, and how do you think that would land in the GBV space?
Look, I've always been one to advocate that GBV does not solely focus on women. And also, what we fail to realize as a society is that you may be standing here dressed as a man, but you may not identify yourself as a man. So, gaps. There's a lot of gaps in what we have put forth, and I'm hoping the issue of men's dialogue. I have been implementing this in my organizations, non-profit organizations that I have been involved with. We recently, in September, had a men's dialogue in the Western Cape. So I've always raised the argument that when it comes to gender-based violence, we do not restrict ourselves to a gender. And Hazel, let's be honest, we don't have just two genders here.
Yes, it's evolved.
It's evolved.
Yeah.
Like I said, so we have to give recognition to that. And the other thing in terms of pillars, we need to give our kids more voice. There should be a pillar dedicated to them. And we don't have that currently. I'm very surprised I didn't see the Child Commissioner present here, the Children's Commissioner present here. And this should have been a platform where she should have been present. Whether an invitation was extended, I do not know. But this is something where she needed to be present because on a daily basis, our kids are being murdered at the hands of perpetrators, whether it be perpetrators from their very home or perpetrators from their community. It's what we deal with on a daily basis. So her presence was definitely needed here, and I don't understand why she wasn't here.
And this is very interesting because we've heard throughout the summit this whole exclusion of children has become very amplified. Because with gender-based violence and femicide, there is a generational or transgenerational. What do you mean when you pass it on to the next generation?
Yes. Well, communities refer to it as a generational curse.
Yes, generational curse, if we want to put it that way, quote unquote. At what level do we get the next generation involved? How do you see the children? I understand that we want a dedicated pillar for the children. How do we bring them into the gender-based violence space that has very vocal, very robust conversations that may not necessarily be suited for minors, if we include children? How do we protect them? And we also bring them into a space where we have, if we're going to have conversations with men, potential perpetrators, how do we keep them safe with conversations that are palatable enough for their consumption?
It brings us back to the issue of gender recognition. Okay, when I look at it, these perpetrators, we need to understand. If we want to understand gender-based violence, we need to understand the mind of a perpetrator. When did this start? If we can go to their early years, you would find that this started in their home. It comes from patriarchy. It comes from not recognizing their gender. Many families, and we're going back in history now, 30 years ago, for a child to say to his or her parents, I want to dress up as a girl, it was a problem. So the purpose of a summit of this nature requires the different government institutions to work together. My first approach would start at the Department of Basic Education. We roll out a curriculum where our children learn about this in our schools, in terms of life orientation, life skills, etc. So what I'm saying to you, Hazel, in essence, I would engage with the Department of Basic Education, the Ministry of Basic Education, and propose that we revisit the curriculum on life skills. So we revisit the life orientation curriculum. If you look at recent stats, suicide amongst our teenagers, amongst our kids, it's rising at an alarming rate. Why? We look at the outsiders when we look in. This child comes from a perfect family. What could be the reason? I think we need to stop and ask ourselves, what is it that that child wants and is unable to share with you as a parent or with me as a member of the community because there's a stigma attached to it.
And just in closing, you've just brought an interesting perspective where we've had so many conversations about gender-based violence, but we ignore the trauma side of it. How do you think we should engage the trauma, especially with children, the trauma-informed part when it comes to how do we integrate trauma and gender-based violence, because it seems to be a separate conversation.
Actually, it should not be a separate conversation. It's a conversation that should be dealt with. In fact, I was engaging with colleagues and I was saying to them, we don't really speak about trauma. We don't really speak about mental health from a young age because, like gender, it was a taboo subject. Can a child go to his mom or dad and say to them, you know what, I am depressed and this is why I'm depressed, because I'm not happy to be a boy, I want to be a girl. I'm not happy to be called Alex, I want to be called Alexa. And from where we come, that is not allowed. We are forced to accept what our parents want us to accept because society has deemed it incorrect for us to feel a certain way. Mental health has never been the focus of many communities, and I don't want to appear to be racialist in my comment, but the reality of it is that it has not been spoken about in communities of color. It's a taboo subject, much like HIV and AIDS. So I would propose and I reiterate that this needs to be rolled out at the Department of Basic Education at primary level. We need to introduce this into our system. Trauma counseling should be provided from an early age. Our school guidance counselor system, we need to look at it. And maybe if we can have a dedicated professional person, not just somebody who's been appointed by the student governing body to act as a guidance counselor. And the term guidance should be changed. It is what it is. It's either a psychologist or somebody associated with trauma. Kids go through trauma. Domestic violence traumatizes a child. So we need to change the narrative. The narrative from being told, shh, this is not acceptable. And that can only start at ground level. And when I say ground level, I mean at primary school level. And we roll it out. We need to then discuss with the Ministry of Higher Education how do we roll this out at university level. So women or men don't just sit around and accept bullying. Also at school level, primary school level, teenagers can be, they say little demons to each other. The bullying, insofar as gender, needs to stop. We need to recognize many families, many homes still regard men as the preference sex. And when I say men, you and I may not regard a individual as a man, or a individual may not regard themselves as a man. But the reality is that we are forced to accept that there is just two genders in this world, and that is incorrect.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Prabashni.
Thank you.
We'll do a follow-up session in our podcast, but thank you for this interview.